Welcome to this seminar entitled Meeting Young People Where They're At. We are delighted to have the team from Romsey Mill speaking to you today. And Romsey Mill are so experienced and brilliantly talented at reaching young people that may not actually come across the threshold of your church buildings or your youth ministry or youth groups. But actually what we're going to be looking at today with Romsey Mill is actually looking at how to engage with young people on the margins, those in the wider community. And they want to share with you some experiences, some stories, some ideas and top tips as to how maybe you too could have a heart for to get alongside to really reach those young people. So do be inspired from what you hear from them. Do be thinking about your own scenarios, and we hope and pray that this will inspire and equip you. Do, as always, connect with the hashtag, engage with the chat, do pose your questions, put your reflections down that might inspire and bless others too. But we really hope and pray that this will be really fruitful for you too as you look to meet your young people where they're at. So enjoy this seminar.
Hello everyone, welcome to our seminar, Meeting Young People Where They're At. Thanks a lot for joining us today. I hope you've had a good morning so far. We're delighted to be able to present this to you this morning. We recognise we're not the experts by any means with a lot of this, but it's something we are really passionate about, which is going out and meeting young people on the streets in the community and building relationships with them. We work for a charity called Romsey Mill. Romsey Mill has been going about 40 years, based in Cambridge, working in South Cambs and a part of Peterborough, and looking to support those who are most vulnerable and most disadvantaged. My name is John Sanders. I lead our youth work team there, and I've been doing youth work for a long time now, nearly 19 years, both in church and community settings. And Jonathan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep, so my name is Jonathan Bouvert. I've been working with Romsey Mill for just over 4 years now, particularly working around Camborne, just outside the west of Cambridge. But also been involved in training program as well. I've been involved with youth work now for about 13 years, and a lot of that has been based down around Cambridgeshire. I've had experience in church-based youth work as well as community-based and schools work as well.
Okay, normally we would perhaps, if in person, start with a game or an icebreaker just to get things, warmed up a bit. But instead, we're going to start with just letting you know some learning outcomes for what we're wanting to do, some objectives for today's session. And really, at the heart of it is really, we want to explore what does it look like to go out and meet young people where they are, those who are outside of the church. How do we go out and build relationships with young people who would never come into the building themselves? Often our work, as we look to explore faith with young people, is about trying to encourage those already existing in our groups to go out and meet their friends. And there's a lot of benefits to that. But we want to also say for a lot of young people that perhaps wouldn't work, that model. So how do we as youth workers go out and meet young people in other places, both physically, but also then in response to once we've met them in those different places, how we also get to know them emotionally, how are they right now emotionally, and also to consider where young people are at spiritually right now. So that's the aims for this morning's session.
And I want to just kind of bring up a story that I guess most of us will be quite familiar with, a story of Jesus encountering somebody, and think about the way that he meets this woman here, physically, emotionally and spiritually. So this is in John chapter 4, where Jesus meets a Samaritan woman at the well, and he meets her physically in the place where she is. You may be aware of the story, know that she's marginalised, she's an outcast. She wouldn't have been in the places where other people would be in order to be able to kind of socialise. She's coming to this well at the hottest time of the day, and Jesus makes sure that he's in the right place to be able to have this encounter with her. Now I wonder, did he know that she was coming specifically, or did he just kind of position himself here, knowing that people would be coming who would need to know about the life that he could offer? We can kind of wonder exactly why Jesus ended up there. The fact is that he was in the right place to be able to have that physical encounter with her around the activity that she was doing, which was getting water. And Jesus engages with her emotionally. She's thirsty for connection with other people. She wouldn't have had social networks, people to engage with and encounter. And so actually for Jesus to be able to do that already meets some of the needs that she's got. Jesus also shares some of his kind of emotions with her. He's tired, he's thirsty, he doesn't hide that away, and he's open and vulnerable about where he's at, and that enables this emotional encounter with the woman. And Jesus also meets her where she's at spiritually. She's also spiritually thirsty. And as soon as Jesus starts to talk about the living water that he can offer, she jumps into that conversation and says, how can I get this living water? And we see that Jesus brings truth into the encounter. He brings in the truth of this woman's past and of where she's at now, but also the truth of what he can offer her, the life that he can bring to her. And she really becomes one of the first missionaries as she then goes back and tells the people in her community about Jesus. So we're going to be thinking about, taking from Jesus' example about how we can engage with young people physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
The first thing we're going to do is consider, where are young people physically? It might be that you've engaged this session today because you're wanting to meet more young people and you're not quite sure how to do that. Perhaps normally it's been about hoping young people come into the church building, but actually you want to get out there and you recognise there's a lot of young people in your local community that you just don't know, and you'd like to do that. So firstly, we just want you to think about, where do young people that you know or in your local community spend their time? We don't have time in this session for you just now to do that, but we'd love you to go away from this session later on today and just write down, where geographically are the young people in your community? Where do they like to spend their time? And we recognise that there's probably two main areas that they'll be. It's in the community and in the school that are two of the main areas where young people spend their time. So the next few minutes, we're going to look at how do we engage with young people, both in their community, but also in the school. And Jonathan's going to kick us off.
Yeah, so with community activities, I think often, particularly for those of us who are involved with churches, and we think about new activities we might want to run, we often think about it from that perspective of what can we put on that might encourage young people. If they're interested in music, we might do a music group, or sports, we might run some sporting activities. We feel that we need to be the ones to initiate activities. But actually, within a lot of communities, probably most communities, there are existing activities taking place which young people are connected into. And these are just some of the examples, from some of the areas around about where we work. There may well already be youth clubs running sports and music, particularly focus groups around for young carers or well-being or social action. And I think it's a great perspective for us to have to before we start to think that we need to be the ones running these things. As Christians, as people who want to reach young people, how can we go and support what's already happening in our community and take our Christian witness into those places? So actually, are there already things going on around about you who may be desperate for people to get involved and to be part of those groups? And actually, could that be a really valuable way of you building up relationships with young people and just sharing who you are in a very natural way?
Another great way to meet young people in their local community is actually through detached work. It's something we do a lot at Romsey Mill. We really believe in the power of detached work to go out and meet young people where they're hanging out and build relationships with them in those places, and then start to shape the work that we do based on what they like doing themselves. For those of you, some of you may have been doing detached work a long time, some of you might be quite new to it. Detached work is youth work that takes place away from buildings or other provision, primarily intended for the use of young people, and instead happens in spaces which young people might identify as their own ground. For instance, the street parks, bus shelters, cafes, shopping and leisure precincts, and other places where young people choose to meet. So it's about going out to where they're hanging out, maybe on the weekend, wherever it is in an evening, and getting to know them. And for us, detached work, if we move on to the next slide, is around, there's so many distinctive aims of detached work which make it so powerful. Firstly, it's about meeting young people who wouldn't necessarily ever come into a building, come into a church, a youth centre, whatever, but it's about us going out to them and looking for them. It immediately shifts the power dynamic towards them, which is really powerful. I think often in youth work and it's in church stuff, it can be very much we're in charge, and there can be a sense of being patronising around that. And actually this puts all the power in their hands. They're the ones in charge, and they can tell us to go away if they want to. It also, for a lot of us, it's really important that actually at the heart of this work is relationships and conversation. We don't need lots of resources. Actually we are the resource, and we can just go out and spend time building a relationship with them. It's simple in that sense. I'm sure all of you are aware that young people are often judged in the local community, antisocial behaviour, etc. And actually, as we go out and meet them in those places, and even as they are engaging in antisocial behaviour, we can get to know them, and we can, as we build that relationship, be an advocate for them in the community and stand up for them. We know as well, and particularly during the pandemic, domestic abuse rates went up high, hugely. And actually, for a lot of young people, there's very good reason why they are out of the house. We need to go out and meet them then, don't we? We need to come alongside them and find out what's going on in their lives. And actually, for a lot of us, we don't have a good building. We don't have a good youth centre where we can meet young people. So again, this is stripped away. We're just going out as youth workers. We're meeting them in the open spaces. We don't need a building to do that. And we can do good youth work through Detached. So for us, we believe really in the importance of it. We just want to talk very quickly through, 6 stages of how you might begin Detached work. We recognise it can be quite daunting. We understand that. It is for us at times as well, but we do really think that it's so significant for the reasons I've just outlined. So firstly, stage 1, if you were thinking of doing Detached work, it would just be doing some preliminary work, just starting to do a bit of a risk assessment around the work, making sure you've got enough staff to do it. We would always recommend doing 2 staff, maybe 3. At any one time, so making sure you've got enough people to do it with, making ID cards, badges, just so you've got that sense of accountability. And then the next stage would be actually just going out into the community, just to sort of see what times of the week work, when do we tend to know there's young people out and where, perhaps being aware of other service providers maybe doing this sort of work, so you're not kind of doubling up, being aware of other kind of key organisations who might need to know, such as police or local shops or other people who are around in that local community. And then the next stage is when it gets a bit more interesting, is when you start going out and doing Detached work. And that's when you just start to make contact with young people, perhaps going up to them and just introducing yourself, maybe only spending a few seconds doing that, and then going off on your way and saying, look, we're just going to be around each week. We're youth workers. We're just here to kind of get to know young people and find out what you like doing and what's not so good about your community. What stuff would you like doing? How can we help you? And then a stage 4 kicks in. That's when, over a series of weeks, as they've started to see you're serious, you're committed to this work, they'll then start to open up as you build relationships. And initially that 10-second contact then becomes a couple of minutes conversation, and then another few months down the line, it's a 5-minute, 10-minute conversation, and it's a slow process, but actually that's where the key work happens, where they see you really care about them, and actually you can help them with stuff, or you can point them in the direction of other services who can help them with other stuff too. And that can be some of the most exciting youth work you could ever do. A key part, stage 5, is actually the evaluating of the work, monitoring, keeping reports, keeping a sense of accountability about what you're doing, what times you're out, and making sure people know what you're doing. And lastly, stage 6, actually at some point there might be a time when that part of Detached work needs to change or stop, either because people move on, like staff move on, youth workers move on, or you need to change the time of the week. And I think with anything like that, you need to see it like any other youth group you run, that you still communicate with the young people and say, actually, we're now going to do this on a Tuesday night instead of a Friday night, or this person's had to change their jobs, they can't do it anymore, whatever. But just that sense of communication with the young people about the project can be really important. So that's just a very short look at Detached work, something we really believe in passionately as a great way of going out and meeting young people where they are hanging out.
So we've got that kind of community element, young people being out and about around the community. Another place the young people are, as John mentioned earlier, is in school. The majority of young people will be in school the majority of the time, not entirely, but certainly somewhere if we want to meet young people, in some way it makes sense for us to be. And there are a whole lot of different ways that we can be involved in schools. There might be some of these that you're familiar with and think, oh yeah, I'm aware of that, it's already happening. So we can be involved in Christian unions, and specifically faith-based work, assemblies up the front, like in lunchtime groups. Some of the work might be more kind of part of the curriculum, so like RE lessons, taking part in particular focus days that the school's running. But some of the work might not have faith in the forefront in terms of what we're talking about, but can be about serving and supporting the school. So that could be mentoring or well-being groups, supporting with particular challenges the school and young people face. So, for example, kind of period poverty, or just being part of groups of the schools running, such as youth voice. There's a whole lot of different ways that we can engage in schools and have that involvement there.
I'm sure some of those you might be involved in, other ones you won't be, and hopefully that gives you a few ideas. But we're now just going to hear from someone we partner with, another youth worker who works for the Ely Diocese in a school in a place called Wisbech in North Cambridgeshire. We're just going to watch a couple of minutes video of her talking about the value of schools work as a Christian.
But what's been really exciting about working here is just the incredible bridge that you can build between the church and the school, and the trust that the school will put into you as a church, as Christians, as people who want to come and listen and support young people, because essentially you have them at the heart of what you do. And I would say to any church or any person thinking about getting involved in schools work, particularly with secondary schools who are not faith schools, it can feel really daunting, and it can feel like it's almost an impossible thing to do. But actually, I came in here with no agenda around pushing Christianity as a faith. I came in here to serve the school, and I think that's the attitude that the school has really responded well to. I've built up a trusted relationship, and I spend time with students primarily listening and giving them a space to offload, to talk about anything that they want, to talk about their feelings, and to share things that they're finding really difficult, which for a lot of them can be quite complex social situations. Their family makeups can be quite unusual. They are from all kinds of backgrounds here. We've got people from Eastern Europe, we've got travelling families, we've got people who have moved into a care setting, so they're looked after. And it's not about being an expert in any of those particular areas. It's about being a non-judgmental ear and a person of love who wants to be fully present with young people and give them the space to talk and be heard in a way that they may never have experienced before. And that in itself can be quite transformative.
I think for all of us, we continue to have to think about how we engage with schools. I think for some of us, it's often been through kind of Christian unions and assemblies, but where are the other places where actually we can really serve in our schools and be such a significant part of that? So 3 quick tips about how to engage with schools if you haven't done a lot of that already. Firstly, I think it's about being professional. It's about contacting the school from your work email address, maybe contact the Senko or inclusion manager and saying, I'm a local youth worker. I've got some time which I could give to the school. Would you consider meeting with me just for us to explore that? I'd love to be able to help in some way. Secondly, as Eleanor said as well, it's not about you coming with what you want to bring. It's about listening to the school. What do they need? What are the needs of the school? It's not about us saying what we think we need to offer the school. It's about them telling us what the needs are and how we can help respond to that. And thirdly, I think we need to consider about how we present ourselves. So actually what you wear is really important as you go into the school. I think we all want to try and look cool to the young people and approachable, and obviously we understand that, and that's fine if out in the community. But actually, if you're going to the school, you've got to think about what the staff think as well. And there's so many stories, aren't there, of probably each of us have experienced at some point in our lives when we were confused for being a pupil in the school. But actually, we've got to think about maybe we need to wear a bit smarter clothes if that's actually going to earn us more respect from the staff, because they're the ones that can open the door for the young people. So just something to consider with that.
Brilliant. So yeah, it's obviously kind of key to think about how we're going to actually physically meet young people and have that engagement with them. And as we get to know young people, the kind of next thing we want to think a little bit about is actually how we engage young people emotionally, and where are young people emotionally. And obviously over the past couple of years, there's been a huge amount of upheaval in terms of young people's lives, and a lot of kind of shifting in terms of where young people are at, and thinking a huge amount of challenge. And I think one of the most important things that we can do is to create the space and the time to allow young people to share and to open up. It's been the same for young people as it would be for many of us. So we're not going to meet somebody for the first time and start to share a whole life story with them. Actually, having a good relationship is really key for young people feeling comfortable and feeling able to open up and share stuff that might be very personal, very deep for them. And maybe also just because young people did share with you kind of pre-pandemic, it might feel as being quite a significant change in their life circumstances since then, and they might need a bit more kind of patience and time to rebuild that, to help young people to again feel they can kind of emotionally connect. Something I think that we often miss is just asking young people how they're doing, and more than just that initial, oh, how are you, how are things going, but actually asking that question for a second time, how are you really doing? I think within the structures often that we create around the youth clubs and the sessions, we can have very busy programs where we can go right from the start time to the end time. And if a young person really had something that they wanted to share, there might not be space within that where there's just a moment where they can say something. Some of the most significant conversations that I've had with with young people have been where we've just kind of stepped outside the building in the middle of something, and it's just in that moment where there's a particular opportunity a young person feels able to to share something that's much deeper. John, I know you've got a story as well of a young person who shared with you.
Yeah, I had a really, I suppose, significant moment in my youth work many years ago, where we were working with a girl who engaged with a lot of our kind of overtly Christian stuff, probably 3 things a week she was coming to. Been working with her for a number of years, sort of 15-year-old girl. She then started attending a more community-based project, actually a romance academy, if you remember that, a few years ago. And in that environment, she suddenly opened up a lot more about stuff that had been going on in her life, and the really challenging stuff that was had been happening in her life. And it really struck me that she hadn't felt able to offload that and to talk to a youth worker in more of a church context. And it felt to me that the significant part of that was actually how many opportunities and what was the culture of those groups to actually just open up about stuff other than faith. And for me, that was really significant, because from then on, I always, in any of my church-based work or Christian-based work, if you want to call it like that, always gave opportunities for young people to firstly share about how they're feeling and how they're doing. And I think that's really significant.
Brilliant. I think it can be really helpful for us to have an understanding of where young people are kind of generally, just to help with kind of starting some of those conversations. So the Good Childhood Report's a really good one to look at. They give some really valuable research about how young people are doing. And I want to share just a few snippets from there, but I would suggest going to have a look if you're interested in this a bit more. But here's some graphs looking over the past 10 years, although they're dated now, they're a couple of years old, split into male and female. And this is trending kind of, children's happiness with different aspects of their life. This is age 10 to 15. And you can see, kind of generally speaking, with family being a little bit of an exception, but actually for most other areas, friendship, school, appearance, young people's happiness has dropped quite significantly in terms of schools, life as a whole, school appearance. So these might be some of the areas that you're considering as you're engaging with young people, that they might be wanting to kind of explore, wanting to share. Something else is this really helpful to see, I think, is parents' views on sorry sorry, I'm talking too much. This is parents' views on their children's happiness kind of during that period of COVID. So actually considering kind of where they might have been at the beginning of COVID to up until kind of during the process. This was data from last year. Some of the areas that have changed, and you can see some things such as kind of family and the way the young people have used their time. There's actually a number of young people much happier with that, because actually, I guess time's been used very differently. But looking towards the bottom of the graph, there's areas such as in school, with friends, particular things like looking to the future, and there's choices the young people have where they're feeling significantly unhappier around some of those areas. So again, having some of that information can really help when you're for young people who are maybe not sharing a lot, but can help to guide some of the conversation around some of the things they might be feeling they're kind of struggling with. And there's obviously a whole lot of different resources out there that can be helpful in some of these conversations. Sometimes, as we said earlier with Detached work, you are the best resource you have. And sometimes it is just having a conversation with them. But there can be things you can create or off-the-shelf resources. Youthscape is a brilliant place to have a look in terms of emotional intelligence, and resources around exploring emotions. I want to share just one thing that I produced a few years ago when doing a group with some boys in school about anger, and I recognised actually, although anger was maybe what they thought they were feeling, there was a whole load of other stuff underneath that. And so I just printed off this list of different emotions on cards. We put that on the table and we use it in different ways to help them identify what was underneath that kind of emotion on the surface. So be creative around putting together resources around helping young people, helping young people to talk in different ways about how they're feeling. Don't be afraid to share as well where you're at kind of emotionally. Sometimes that kind of vulnerability can help young people to open up, as long as that's done in the correct way.
And the last part of what we want to look at today with you is, where are young people at spiritually? And this is key, isn't it, for us? And I think, again, the first key point is we need to ask them. We need to ask them. We can't just expect to know the answers. And recently in our work, we've done a bit of a survey of young people, just asking some questions about faith. In some ways that feels a bit old school, but actually it creates some conversation straight away by doing that. And I'd encourage you to do something similar if you want, or at least create opportunities where you can really have good conversations to find out what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what they've been interested in exploring more. So really kind of start with that as a basis, don't assume. Secondly, I think it's also about rethinking what those activities look like as you explore faith. It doesn't have to look the same as it did before. It doesn't have to be that same course, again, because it worked last time. Be creative. Think what's going to work for these young people in the light of the things they've communicated about what they want to explore and how they're feeling at the moment spiritually. And thirdly, I think more and more, it's about inviting young people into experience. It can't just be about us talking to them about faith and having a little bit of discussion about that. It's about really inviting them into experience, inviting them into worship, inviting them into prayer, even if they're not quite sure what they believe or who they're praying to. I think it's about inviting them into projects which engage them in these kind of conversations and worship. And that's not just about music. That can be around social action projects, encouraging, giving young people the opportunity to explore what faith is by getting their hands dirty and doing practical stuff. All of that is inviting them into worship and inviting them into exploring who God is. So that's certainly a lot of what we've done at Romsey Mill over the last few years. There's a lot more we could do around that, but that's certainly how we're going to be going moving forward as well, in terms of how we explore faith with young people, is inviting them into experience.
I just want to share one resource I found useful. We've used it in a few different ways, and it's a video series called Clear. So that's K-L-E-E-R. It's available online through a few different partner organisations, and it's brilliant because it encourages young people just to be open to the idea of spirituality, and that there's something more than just a physical experience round about them. It's very short videos that can be used on their own, it can be used kind of together in groups, individually, a whole lot of different ways. But it just opens up some of those conversations. And what's brilliant, as we've used that before, is we're so aware young people are spiritual. Young people are engaging in spirituality. They're asking questions about God already. And I don't think we need to feel like we've got to initiate all this stuff. Actually, God is already on the move. God's on the mission field. God is working with young people, even in ways that we don't know and they don't involve us. I had a young person recently came to me and said, I've just become a Christian. What do I do next? And that was so encouraging for me, because I had no previous conversation with her. That was just the Holy Spirit moving in her life. And so I'd love if we just kind of finish our time just by praying and asking God to help us to see those places where He is moving, as we can step into that. So let's pray together. Father God, we thank you that you love each and every young person that we engage with, God. Thank you that you are already working in their lives, that you're working in the communities and schools and churches that we're part of. God, would you open our eyes to see what you're doing? Would you open our eyes to see where it is that you're inviting us into that, to be part of that, and help us to be open to joining in with that. In Jesus' name, amen.
Okay, that's the end of our seminar this morning. Thank you so much for joining with us. We'd have loved to have done this in person and spent time with you. If you do have any questions or would like to continue this conversation with us, this is our email address here. Feel free to contact us. But yeah, we just we'll be praying for you, and we really hope there's been parts of today which have been helpful, whether it's looking at where young people are at spiritually, emotionally, or practically or physically, sorry. And hopefully there's been some practical support for you in doing that. So we really hope that's been helpful. But yeah, we hope you have a great rest of the day. And if you do like to contact us, we'd love to hear from you. Cheerio.
Bye then.